Hi, I'm Bree with Sustainably Balanced Equine, and welcome to part 2 of Ollie's Barefoot Transition. And I am so excited to show you guys what is going on with his feet because we pulled his shoes off yesterday and I feel like there are already positive changes, but he is sore. And I wanted to talk a lot about that in this video because that is one of the biggest reasons I think people are afraid to transition barefoot, because they don't want their horse to be sore and lame and not be able to be ridden or used or just uncomfortable in general. So I'm going to be talking through the different steps of hoof protection that I'm going to be using for him, and hopefully in our next video we will know whether or not the first level is working for him. So I also wanted to show you guys the postural changes that I'm seeing in his body. I feel like already he is starting to let down and soften, and there's going to be, I think, a lot of compensation patterns that we may have to start rewiring with the Bodywork and with in-hand work, especially in regards to his feet, because I did some research. I found out more about his background, and I was able to see a video of him moving under saddle in a sale video about 3 or 4 years ago, and he had some of the same patterns that I was seeing before I pulled his shoes off in that video. So it's interesting to see how long that's been around and how long it might take us to really unravel this and to help support him into having a better balance in his body and in his feet. There are also multiple factors when it goes into having a healthy barefoot, and the trim slash hoof care is just one of them. So I feel like some of the other ones are a little bit neglected, especially when it comes to a horse that is sore. So I just wanted to talk about those variables as well. And the biggest one I feel like is movement. How much movement the horse is able to get, like if they're able to continually use their feet, because it's like a muscle, right? Like use it or lose it. So the more that they're using their feet, if they are not super lame and don't have some sort of tendon injury, the better, because that actually builds a better barefoot in general. Like it allows them to have that density and have that depth that creates a supported barefoot. And also another one that is like really important is the diet. So if you have a horse with metabolic issues, that is automatically going to set them up for hoof issues. And I feel like it's so neglected that, and like almost like so overlooked, that people even in the barefoot world don't see it that way. And I see this all the time where a horse has been under my hoof care guidance for a long time. Like I've worked on this horse for a long time, and they make a diet change and their hooves shift for the better or the worse within even a trim cycle, so 4 to 6 weeks. And it's incredibly insidious when you are dealing with metabolic problems. So I feel like it's really important to be aware of the triggers of laminitis, and also being educated on a forage-based diet. I really like the ECIR diet for not just emergency cases for metabolic problems, but also just their regular horse diet. I feel like it's extremely balanced and gives them all of the things that they need to grow a healthy foot. My horses are on a forage-based diet, and I have them also on a mineral supplement. And what the minerals do, basically the trace minerals and amino acids, are what allow the integumentary system, or the skin and the coat and the hooves, to grow properly. So if you are giving the cells the proper building blocks to grow a good hoof, they're going to be much more successful down the road than if you're feeding them something that isn't as optimal for them, or something that is super high in sugar and in starch. So that's really important. And then also I am going to obviously talk about the hoof protection, but the first hoof protection option that I'm going to be trying for Ollie is the hoof armor. And what hoof armor is it's basically this chemical material that you put onto the soles and even the frog of the hoof to allow it to harden up and also prevent wear. And what's really important with Ollie especially is I don't want him to be wearing down his heels on his hind feet any more than he already has. He doesn't have a lot of heel, and when they have low heels, especially in the hinds, it can cause a lot of compensation patterns. So that actually causes lower back pain. And when they have lower back pain, they change the way they're moving to compensate, and then they continue the cycle of wearing their heels down, and then their toes get really long. So I have worked to correct his toe, but sometimes there's only so much we can remove because trimming is a subtractive process. So if the hoof armor doesn't help and I don't see changes with the trim that I gave him and also the body work that I've been doing, I am going to be adding something to the foot. So like almost like a prosthetic, either a heel with super fast, which is another composite material, or even glue on shoes. So we will see how he does with the hoof armor when it shows up next week. Unfortunately, it was supposed to be here today and it delayed in shipment, so it won't be here till next week. But as soon as I get it, it will be going on his feet and you guys will know about it.
Here is his left front. This is the day after I pulled his shoes off. And as you can see, there's like not very much sole concavity, and I also feel like there isn't very much sole depth, which I feel like leads to the tenderness when you pull the shoes off. And I'd also ideally like to see a lot more heel height on him. And then here's the left hind. I would say that this one is probably the worst one out of all four. He has extremely flat feet on all four, but this one is like extremely flat, and also he has zero heel to speak of. So when I trimmed him, I actually did have to trim his frog back quite a bit just to make sure it wasn't high centered on the ground because that can cause a lot of tenderness. And then here's the right hind. He's got a little bit more heel, but again, still really flat. Very long toe, which I cannot correct in just one trim, and pretty crushed heels. And then here's the right front. This one's actually the best one out of all four. It's still got pretty, in my opinion, thin soles, not enough concavity, but the shape is the best and it has the most heel out of all 4 feet. And I also wanted to mention that this trim looks pretty messy because I left as much foot on as I could. And here's his posture the day after I pulled his shoes. I wanted to point out a couple of things. So I feel like this is a compensatory posture when all four of their feet hurt, when they kind of stagger one front out and then they rest a hind, but they'll continually shift back and forth like he just did. And I don't think that this is a good thing. I feel like they should be able to stand with all four of their feet on a square with their cannon bones vertical and be able to like hold themselves in almost like a neutral posture. Here it's almost like his pelvis is rotated backward. So you can see like basically the top of his butt is angled downward and then his feet crawl up under his belly, or they're coming up under his belly. And I would say that is called a camped under posture, and also with a little bit of pelvic rotation. So that isn't something that only hoof care can fix. This is a long time compensation pattern that he's had for quite a few years, just based on his history and what I was able to find out about him. So that is why I also prioritize the body work and the in hand work along with the hoof care in a rehab, because you need to also retrain the body and the nervous system not to function like this anymore. And yes, hoof protection will help a lot, but you can't fix everything that's going on higher up in the spine without direct work to it, if that makes sense. I had done a bodywork session on him the day after he arrived, but I feel like, especially in this time, and I'm grateful that I do have these skills so I can do them whenever it is necessary for him. I feel like at this time he's going to need a lot because we're making a lot of changes in his body, especially with the hoof care, but also the diet and the environment that he's living in. So I was able to do another bodywork session on him the day after we pulled the shoes. And I feel like it's so important, especially after making any sort of change to the hoof care, but also to dentistry, like their dental balance, to get bodywork done because their nervous system has adapted to a specific balance and you have made changes now. So then the body is going to have to readapt to a new change in the balance of their hooves or of their teeth. So here I'm just working on his pull. I feel like his pull and his lower back especially are the most painful out of his whole body And he's also got a lot of issues just in the muscling of his neck and his top line. And I believe that's due to being ridden in a certain way just over time and also the jobs that he has done in the past. So, what I'm doing is helping his body remember that it can be balanced in a different way and also to kind of restore that connection of the mind to body because the modality that I use is very slow and intentional work. These videos are actually sped up 2 times, so this whole session took me about an hour and 15 minutes of just very slow work, and it's because the body and the nervous system need change or need time to process the change. So it takes about 90 seconds for the fascia to recognize that there is a tension change within the body. So I really focus on being slow and meaningful with what I'm doing because it gives their brain that time to recognize that there is something different happening. And something that's really cool about the nervous system that I love and what the modality that I use, craniosacral, helps with a lot is that 80% of the information going between the body and the brain are actually coming from the body. So automatically, if you have any sort of tension in the body, it's going to inhibit all of that information coming from the body directly to the brain via the nervous system. So, in order to help switch that or like encourage better communication, you have to work on the body, and then that will help with the training side of things, especially if they're a little bit more spooky or more tense, like this guy is. It makes it a lot easier for them to understand and cope with new training ideas. So I wanted to show you guys how he was moving in his stall. Again, this was the day after, and he was quite tender, especially on those fronts. But I felt like just overall, all 4 feet were just not very happy. And this stalls are pretty rocky at this barn. So I also expected this. But I wanted to show you just what he looks like directly after. And I just basically tried to lunge him, and I was getting a lot of resistance. And I feel like this is because of his sore feet, because he wasn't this sore last week before I pulled the shoes off. And he was actually quite willing to work. So if you're seeing that with your horse, you might want to start looking into if they have sore feet, like if they're suddenly refusing when they're not normally like that. Because I can tell that he's trying, but he is also quite tender and very short in his strides on all four. And in a second, I'm going to try and start asking him to trot. First, I ask energetically, and then I ask with external cues. And you can just see he's kind of rushing, and then he slows down, and then he rushes, and then he slows down. And again, this is just very sore hoof behavior all around. I didn't make him work that hard. I just wanted to get him moving for the sake of the video so you guys can see what happens when you start a barefoot transition and maybe like when to consider to add more support or give them something like the hoof armor or the boots to help take the edge off of the soreness while you're transitioning because when they've had shoes on for most of their life, it can be really difficult to just take them off and expect them to just go normally because their feet have adapted to that environment. So they have to kind of adapt to their new environment with the barefoot and also like not having the shoes on anymore. They need to grow back that protection that was underneath the shoe that needed to be trimmed off in order to get a better fit for the shoe. So, keeping all of that in mind, I'm pretty optimistic for his rehab because he is already starting to show even more signs of feeling better on his feet as the days go on. And that's something that I'm always looking for in a barefoot rehab. I feel like it's really important to make sure that they're not staying in that tender stage for that long, like maybe like a few days or so, but not weeks on end, because that's when you need to support them with something else. There may be other hoof problems going on.
Okay, so I ended up coming back out today. I just felt like I had more tools in my toolbox than just waiting for the hoof armor to come. So I decided to use Superfast, which is a composite material that they actually use to help horses with limb deformities when they're born, especially to stand their feet up basically. So it creates like a prosthetic if they have a limb deformity. So I decided to use that to build up his heels on his hinds, and then just do a little rim around his fronts on the sole just to give him that little extra lift. And I find it really fascinating with the Superfast because you can actually turn the horse out with it and they'll just wear it down to whatever they need it to, or wherever they need it to be. And I just really love that because he doesn't have to stay stuck in something like a metal steel shoe that can't wear down if he needs it to. And it's really ugly. My application was not perfect. Back there, he just cracks me up. My application wasn't perfect, so I will probably be fixing it later on. This was my first time using Superfast as a prosthetic and not as a glue for glue on shoes. So we will see. I'll definitely be using the hoof armor once it comes. Again, I just felt really bad leaving him.
So the application of the Superfast was pretty easy. I just cleaned the foot up and threw it on there. And then afterward, you can use a rasp or nippers or some other hoof tool to shape it up in order to support whatever you're trying to do. So I basically just built a little prosthetic heel on his hoof. And I feel like, so it's been a few days like post when I am editing this video. He did lose one half of this right hind, but I feel like the rest of it has been super supportive to his feet. So I wanted to show you his movement after I applied it. And I felt like his pelvic angle looked a lot softer. Like it looked like he was able to not camp under nearly as far. Here, I gotta back him up. And like I feel like just his hoof angles overall improved a lot just by adding that extra little bit on his heels to kind of just give him the support that he needs without throwing a shoe back on. And here he is directly after the super fast application. So you can see those fronts were still tender. I believe this video was before I added it on his fronts and it's just on his hinds. But I feel like just overall, he seems like he's able to open his whole top line better and to walk smoothly instead of throwing his head up and walking super short and choppy strides. So he may be a little bit tender, but he's actually moving a lot better. He's just almost like weak in his body because of the lack of top line and stuff. And then his feet are a little bit tender. So he kind of has to be aware of that as he's moving. And then here was his posture the next day. I felt like it was greatly improved. And his movement, I felt like had gotten even better. Like he's very slow starting out, like very hesitant starting out, but once he gets going and warms up a little bit, I think his strides reach out a lot more and he's starting to have even very slightly heel first landings, which is really good for the hoof. Like we don't want a toe first landing. So it's cool that he's able to start using his foot properly because that is what will also help with his comfort, because inside of the hoof are basically material structures that are made to absorb concussion and to support the horse. And if they are not landing heel first, especially on a barefoot, but even with shoes on, it's actually going to put a lot of strain on joints and on the tip of the coffin bone inside of the hoof. So it's just really cool to see these changes. Like I was worried about him being sore, but I feel like the super fast took the edge off and he's starting to improve more and more as time goes on. So that gives me like hope and also a lot of good feedback that what we're doing is working. So the hoof armor still hasn't come yet, but I'm really optimistic that once we get it on, it's going to really take the edge off even more and that we won't have to put boots on. And I'm just super grateful that I have all of these tools in my toolbox because it's fun to see him change. Um, this is just a video of day 3 of the super fast, and you can see that he's already worn it down a lot, but it's cool because it adds more of that heel. And here is his movement on day 4 of the super fast. And I was really pleased with how much better he is basically striding out. His strides look a lot more even, and he's actually tracking up, which means that his hind feet are pretty much following in the footprints of the front feet. And just overall, I'm really optimistic about this rehab because he has improved so quickly. And I'm just really looking forward to showing you guys even more as time goes on, just how supportive you can be with other materials than just shoes. And that is all I have for you for this part 2 video. I'm really looking forward to continuing this series, and I just appreciate all the love and support that you guys have had so far. So make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and thank you so much for watching.